Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we are on location in Culver City, California at the offices of Hub, and we are seated with its president and founder, Charlie Gay. Charlie has embarked upon a really interesting and much needed endeavor of helping feed children, educate children, shelter children, and extend microloans to their mothers, especially in Africa, although that is expanding to other needed parts of the world, to help people in great need who are in a position far different than we are economically. And his heart has been reaching out for decades, actually, to make this kind of difference in the world, having worked for the Princess Diana Foundation in London, working with landmine issues and other sorts of things of this sort, helping people literally internationally get a better life. And now this has consummated in his work and founding of Hub, Humanity Unites Brilliance. And he'll be speaking with us about what that is, what its mission is, and it's really starting a new template, if you will, a new blueprint for charitable work in the world, wherein our hearts can rise to the occasion and we can really give something back to the world while receiving at the same time. So, Charlie, pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mitch, for letting me come on your program today.
It's my pleasure to have you. You know, you're doing such good work. You've been doing so much good work for so long. It's really exemplary. And I wanted our audience to hear about it, hear what you're doing, and how maybe even they can participate. But first of all, just speak, if you would, a little bit, Charlie, about what brought you to this kind of work in the first place.
Well, what brought me to the work was the fact that I think inherently we are all humanitarians.
Yeah.
We're all being of service to ourselves, our families, our communities. We all do our bit. We all give our bit. And so what brought me to the work I do today is that as I progressed in the success of my life, and I had a tremendous amount of success in the outside world of business and life, that I started...
You worked with Cher, didn't you? I didn't put that into the bio, but you worked very closely with her and helping her with her whole production. Is that so?
Cher sponsored me to the United States of America. Without her intervention in my life, I would
you might not be here on A Better World.
I would not be in the United States. And she also exposed me to humanitarian work. She was the chairwoman of the Children Facial Cranial Association after the movie Mask. And at rock concerts, we would have meet and greets with little children, and she would give them their first pair of ears and their first pair of earrings. And we were very hardened rockers and rock and rollers. I was brought to the States to manage her when I was 29, and I'd been a rock promoter beforehand, promoting her in Australia. And so I got to see firsthand the humanitarian work of an amazing lady. Cher is an extraordinary lady. So yes, she brought me to the States and was part of my life. And so I was exposed to humanity, and then I was asked to do a lot of feedings in America and be involved just here in the United States.
Feedings like what?
Homeless feedings.
Oh.
So we would ship 10,000 homeless to a location and feed at the Rose Bowl, or we would send out 28 Feed the Children trucks to 24 locations. And so I got very involved in the feeding programs of Americans Feeding America, and also saw that underneath the arches near the Thames in London. And then I was asked to be executive director of an organization that was birthed actually out of Princess Diana's death. It wasn't the Princess Trust Foundation. It was called the Mindseeker Foundation, which birthed the Soul of Africa program. And its patrons were Nelson Mandela, who's probably the greatest humanitarian, or one of them that we all know about on the planet today. His wife, Gracia Michelle, Richard Branson, Queen Noor, Brad Pitt. And we were doing landmine removal work, initially in Mozambique, a country that Nelson Mandela and his wife lived in.
Mm-hmm. That is fabulous. And so, obviously, your heart was touched through your work with Sharon, which she introduced you to, and it was like a duck to water, so to speak. And that then grew into what you have today as HUB, which is an acronym for Humanity Unites Brilliance. What does that mean? What are you referring to? What are you implying?
Well, it's interesting you said...
Although I feel I like the implication.
Interesting you said duck to water, and I haven't heard that phrase before in regards my involvement as a humanitarian. However, if you take the analogy that every child can ride a bicycle, and then as we get older, perhaps we haven't had a bicycle in our garage for 10 or 20 years, and then we get on a bicycle, we can still bicycle. A duck getting into water, it's natural. And if you take what I said in the first statement, that we're all actually born to be humanitarians, the question is, have our hearts been veneered by the issues of life, the data of life, what I call the minefield of our own minds?
Yep.
And so are we really being of service to ourselves? We often talk about the world out there right now. Is it a world worth saving? And a lot of people say, I want to save the world. But what world do we want to save? The world out there is a world that still has nuclear weapons stockpiled, that has tremendous slavery issues.
Tremendous unconsciousness.
A lot of
really.
Unconsciousness. So really, I've come to a place of serving the world and serving my friends and serving the community and serving myself. And Humanity Unites Brilliance is that. Many people say you can't really come up with a better name for an organization, because we're all born, Mitchell, to be brilliant. We're all born to be brilliant and talented, and it's inside all of us. And in the first stage...
And it wants to shine, Charlie. It wants to shine.
And we're given purposeful gifts in the first stage of our life. We may be a gutterer of... I mean, it's as simple as this. We may be guttering roofs today. A gutter of a roof is someone that I would take into Africa and put the gutters on a roof of a school building, and then a 6 to 24,000 liter drum, and suddenly, and with a small ion filter, we've suddenly got a rain catcher. Well, we're now putting hundreds of rain catchers on roofs around the world because it rains, we just haven't caught it. So Humanity Unites Brilliance is literally taking your skills, everyone's skills that are listening on this call or watching this program, and taking that brilliance that is inherent in the first stage of our life, and then applying it to others in their brilliance, converging in a co-committed way, which is exactly what the world has asked us to do, to celebrate the diversity of who we are. We're all diverse, but we're united by far more that separates us, bringing it together. And of course, humanity itself is an action. It's not an awareness. So the action of humanity brings also everything up for ourselves to look at. Even as we're giving to others, we're dealing with our own stuff.
What we're talking about is a confluence of brilliance, you could say. And according to the Native American teachings, we are all given by Creator in that worldview gifts, talents, inherent skills. Some can sing, some can dance, some can craft, some can speak, some can be a visionary. And when we pool these resources together, we have a humanity that is on fire. And it feels to me that with the staff that you have put together, what I have observed, the talent pool that you've put together, both of members and the faculty, you are creating like a fire, if you will, and igniting passion in people, Charlie, who are ready to do good and are doing a lot of good under the auspices of HUB. That's, really changing the world. This is what we need more of.
It is brilliant. And you mentioned the word faculty. Faculty is critical because in the receiving of education and understanding of how we can be better, we can keep magnifying, often mirror and buffer a mirror of someone else.
Exactly.
Because as I buffer them, then I get to see myself more
Polish
clearly.
that mirror, as they say in Zen.
Correct.
Exactly.
And that's what we're doing. So the faculty as well is sort of the world's finest communicators of global thinkers, global shift makers, transformational communicators, coaches, the business paradigm coaches that we know about, like Jack Canfield, who co-created Chicken Soup for the Soul, the #1 book author in the history of books, a man called Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckworth, who was Oprah's Best Life Ever series coach this year. Agape, and more, are in the world as global leaders. They understand what it is to let go of the old and emerge into the new. The faculty isn't made up of CEOs of Chrysler or Ford, for instance.
They're getting there. What can I say?
Yeah.
You bring to mind something, a quote of Joseph Campbell's, the great comparative mythologist, who set up a story that goes like this. Why is it that we all are those humanitarians that you referred to, sort of inherently, organically, if you will? He says that there's a very interesting phenomenon that occurs, Charlie, that when two people are standing on a street corner and a bus goes by and they're strangers, yet if one starts to walk into the street, the other automatically goes out and risks their own life to save the other person, commonly thought of as a stranger. What is that impulse inside humans to do that, to put their own life at risk to help another? But in a sense, that answers to that question of why we all feel this impulse to want to help people in need, who have less perhaps than we have, and who are suffering. So I just wanted to bring that to bear in the overall picture of what I feel you are doing and spearheading in Hub to help people get in touch with that spirit, that deeply human spirit.
There's a beautiful quote and an analogy of going out and saving your friend on the street.
But a stranger, that's actually the point. It's so interesting. You don't even know the person, and yet the impulse is, get out of there.
Yeah.
So there's this sort of like love is binding, something much deeper than the conscious mind recognizes between us all.
If we had put as much effort consciously into supporting ourselves as we do others, the world would not be at the crisis that it's in at the moment.
Right, absolutely. Now, what's interesting also about what you're doing, because God knows there have been charities of all sorts going on for eons. It's an inherent part of human nature.
Right.
But you have done something that's a bit divergent, and that is setting this up, Hub, as a profit center, not a non-profit. Could you speak about that? Because I actually think that's one of its elements of brilliance.
Well, the new paradigm calls for profit, but not profit to the hoarding of profit, profit for the circulation of profit. What I mean by that, very simply, is that the old model of nonprofit is a paradigm where you put $1 into the field and you give it to a humanitarian, for instance, that has an orphanage or a doctor. And the nonprofit then spends the dollar. And that's incredibly well spent because, of course, it's been done amazing work. However, then the dollar doesn't come back. It doesn't circulate.
Right.
So the nonprofit has to go back to the donor and say, I've done this.
More, please.
I've done great work. I'm going to show you the work I've done. It's fantastic work. Can I have another $1? And you give the other $1.
Brother, can you
and
spare
then
a
another
dime?
$1, and then another $1, and then you give another $1. But there comes a time when you get fatigued. There comes a time when your economic position in yourself is in a downturn. It comes a time when Katrina will hit and your dollar is deflected somewhere else, quite rightly. It comes a time that the dollar isn't there for the nonprofit. And so in the history of time, nonprofits have not been able to create sustained models to move humanity into where a lot of the hearts of the nonprofit want them to go. The donor fatigue is a massive issue in the world today. And also the question of, well, what impact have I had anyway? And when I was in the field in Mozambique, 500,000 people walked into a refugee camp that didn't exist the day before. Literally did not exist. Floods and cyclones had hit Mozambique. An earthquake had happened just before. 3 months before that, the United Nations, which is meant to police our world, had said a statement in Mozambique one morning in November of 2006 that they had a shortfall of funding. They didn't have the funding for the food program that was predicted for that winter. And that day, 250,000 Mozambicans went into famine crisis. When the floods and cyclones hit, 500,000 people walked into a refugee camp that did not exist the day before. Now, on that day, the non-profits that were there had no money. The non-profits had no food. The United Nations had no money and no food. My patrons were Nelson Mandela and Graça Machel, who are the greatest people in the world as far as Mozambique, and in fact lived in Mozambique. And yet, they were not there to deal with the 500,000 people. So the question that I posed was, why was it that we've given $2.25 trillion to one continent in Africa over the last 30 years, and Mandela had shown us this. And yet it had been at best, importantly, but at best, a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging wound. And so I realized a number of things had to take place. One is we had to converge various organizations to work together at the grassroots, not at the highest level, but at the grassroots. Secondly, we had to bring food and water, which is critical at the front end. It sustains the body. Water, actually, or dirty water, which kills more people than malaria, TB, and AIDS put together.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Today, more people die of diarrhea and dirty water symptoms than malaria, TB, and AIDS put together. Food and water has to be provided at the front end. Has to be.
Clean water.
Clean water. And, you know, we spend $1 trillion on protecting ourselves from ourselves in this year. And yet, $10 million would have every single child educated. 17 million would have every single person fed. Would have every single person fed on this planet. So the circulation that I'm talking about in a for-profit structure actually allows for food and water to be given at the front end, education in the middle, because education is the most powerful weapon that any of us can have.
Truly.
And then financial literacy and what we call pooled microloans that stimulate trade, as you said at the opening, in women. And today, 200 million women in the third world receive microloans, which impacts 6 to 8 children who they're the caregivers of. So really making poverty history, which is a word that you and I have heard a lot about, with the Millennium Goals and Band-Aid and Live Aid and all these different events.
Sure.
Make poverty history, make poverty history. It happens with food and water, it happens with education, and it happens very critically
with the microloans.
With the microloans and financial literacy.
Right.
And
Exactly.
thank God, Mitchell, that now in the United States, 200 million women in the third world have received microloans. And as we go into crisis, as we go into chaos, as we recognize that a dollar is a dollar and not $1,000 like the banking structures of old told us it was,
Leverage.
and 35 million homes today have mortgages that are awash today in the United States. Thank God that this work has been done in the third world so that it actually can come back into the streets of America.
Right. Hallelujah. You know, it's like where they know the value of a dollar, and the value of the dollar actually still exists.
Correct. More
there, you're saying, Charlie, than here.
Correct.
So with this forging of a new model of doing charity work essentially for profit, it interestingly creates incentives all the way around. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it helps in the new paradigm of shifting the whole idea that doing good, through that we can do well. And it seems to me that it should always be that way. The people who are in service are being rewarded financially as well as spiritually for their good work. So I feel that Hub is playing a pivotal role in helping bring forth this new paradigm. And I would like to see that happening across our culture, across our society, in the West and beyond. And look, the work of Mohammed Yunus and the microloan and Sam Daly-Harris, who we were speaking about earlier, and Hub is now also playing a role in that. of the promulgation of these loans that are helping to build infrastructure worldwide so that the small villages can be sustainable. And I think we also need to bring this model here to our own towns and villages as well. Is Hub playing any role in that at this point, or is it an idea that is in its vision?
Well, we have over 5,000 members in the United States and in Canada. At Christmas last year, we carried out the single largest food drop in the history of the United States of America.
Are you kidding?
Within 9 months of being in operation. We were blessed that we were able to converge. The convergence heart of Hub, Humanity Unites Brilliance, brought together the Salvation Army, together with Feed the Children, together with the NBA. Shaquille O'Neal came out for us in Phoenix, together with all our Hub volunteers, together with Avon that gave personal care items for $150 per homeless client. We were able to provide hundreds.
So it may as well look good too, right?
We were able to give over 100,000 boxes to families in 6 cities. We did San Francisco. We started in Phoenix, San Francisco, and the Tenderloin. We did Los Angeles. They were queuing up over 3 blocks from 4:30 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. We actually had frozen chickens coming from a company that had gone bankrupt in Atlanta. We had 40,000 frozen chickens that came in that day. We then went to New Orleans. We went to Detroit, where the car industry had laid off a lot of people. We were in New York, in Harlem, for the 3rd year of the operation. We called it Miracle on Main Street, and now it's Americans Feeding America. So yeah, we do the work in America. Microloans are just starting to be tentatively looked at. Predictably, in the third world, we give a microloan, and a woman starts with $50 to $150. Here, we're looking at what does that template look like. Eunice has just met with Governor Schwarzenegger to discuss this matter. He's just launched a pilot program in Mexico. There's a pilot program actually in your own home city, in Watts, in Queens. And here, a pilot program is being looked at in Watts in South Central. But I want to just get back to that other point about the manifestation of aid as well. On Twitter recently, we've seen the delivery of malaria nets. Larry King and Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore, they've all been working on malaria nets, which is absolutely fantastic. In Britain last month, they had Comic Relief and raised in one day £47 million. They're amazing at that in Europe. And a lot of that went into malaria nets, which is phenomenal. And malaria is an absolute, and malaria has to be stamped out. There's no reason for malaria, and it has to be got rid of.
Right.
Question though, what happens instead of making those malaria nets in factories in the United States or Britain, we actually made them in the villages in Africa? Because before we started giving into those villages, the malaria nets, even though there were few, were made by Africans. So now we have swamped Africa with malaria nets. We've actually taken an industry away from the people indigenous to those villages. What would be great is, and I challenge anyone listening to this, is to take that brilliant idea of donating 10,000 or 100,000 or a million, whatever it is, and saying, okay, I'll donate it. But the $7, just like the T-shirt from the Red campaign, the $7 that it costs the malaria net that Ashton Kutcher is buying or Larry King is buying, why not have that $7 stimulate the industry in the first place in Africa?
The local industry.
Exactly.
Of course. I agree.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things the points that I was making, Charlie, about a lot of what you're doing and, of course, the other microloan organizations is stimulating local economies so they don't have to be reaching out but are sustainable internally.
Right.
So that's the point that you're making here again.
Absolutely.
And it's just so true. And this is a model that the United States is not accustomed to as a society. We're a waste-based society and don't understand conservation and don't really understand, as a group, sustainability.
Right.
Well, now that the dollar is suffering a bit, people are beginning to wake up to these age-old traditional values that actually have been in Europe for the West all along. There's always a greater sense of conservation and sustainability in Europe than we in America have ever known, and slowly that's beginning to change. And maybe through some of the influence of Hub and the consciousness that's growing, this can continue, because it's actually showing a respect for Mother Earth. Now, I know one of the groups that Hub helps to sponsor is the Pachamama Foundation, founded by Lynn Twist and others. And I think that's also part of the spiritual heritage, in a sense, that Hub is contributing to, of respecting humanity, but also that which nurtures humanity, which is Mother Earth herself.
Yes.
This is a very important piece that gets left out so often in charitable works, unless it's specifically a rainforest group or an environmental group. But you have a more holistic vision that I really appreciate, Charlie, because of my own background in both psychology and environmental work. You know, it's like taking on the whole. So,
yeah, and
thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
I mean, the work that Lynn Twist does with Pachamama is there to support us in America to understand conservation and eco-environment issues. We shine the light in the third world so effectively because humanity has always given care to the third world. Today in Liberia, where we work extensively, first female president is in Liberia, President Salif. But we have tremendous solar advances that are going on because the country literally had no electricity. Had no electricity, had no roads. So we are applying all this brilliance that is inside of ourselves in the third world. And of course, it then will shift back once the apathy of is lifted in America.
Exactly, exactly. Charlie, I just want to say a deep thank you from my heart and for the work that you're doing and representing and forwarding, because it's really making a difference in the world. And my organization, A Better World, and our media outlets are really very glad to stand as part of and helping the movement forward. It's really a gift and an honor for us to be part of it. So thank you truly for the work that you're doing.
Millions and millions of people are out there right now that can be united in humanity, and it's great that we can connect and you carry your irrevocability into putting the trumpet into the world, and we look forward to many, many people being in the force for good that we are involved with.
Exactly. God bless.
Thank you.
We will continue.
Thank you.
And if you want to get involved, just go to our website, abetterworld.net, and you can participate as we are in the forwarding of this brilliant idea. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World from Culver City, California, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.